The dusty trail stretched endlessly before Jake Morrison, as his horse carried him deeper into Apache territory. The year was 1882, and the young cowboy had been riding for 3 days straight, following rumors of wild mustangs in the remote canyons of Arizona. His weathered hat shielded his blue eyes from the scorching sun, and his rifle rested across his saddle, ready for whatever dangers might lurk in this unforgiving land. Jake had grown up on a ranch in Texas, learning to ride before he could properly walk. His father had taught him to respect the land and the people who called it home, including the Apache tribes that had lived here for generations. Unlike many of his fellow cowboys, Jake held no hatred for the native people. He understood they were fighting to protect their way of life, just as he would fight to protect his own family. As the sun began to set behind the red rock formations, Jake spotted smoke rising from a hidden valley below. His horse nickered nervously, sensing the presence of others nearby. Jake dismounted and led his horse carefully down the rocky slope, his boots finding purchase on the loose stones. The smell of cooking meat and burning wood filled his nostrils, and he could hear the soft murmur of voices speaking in Apache. Through the gathering darkness, Jake could make out the glow of a campfire surrounded by several figures. His heart pounded as he realized he had stumbled upon an Apache camp. He knew he should turn back, ride away into the night, and forget he had ever seen this place. But something held him there, crouched behind a large boulder, watching the peaceful scene unfold before him. 2 young women sat by the fire, their long black hair catching the firelight as they worked on what appeared to be beadwork. They moved with a grace that took Jake's breath away, their hands swift and sure as they created intricate patterns with colored beads. An older woman, perhaps their mother, stirred a pot over the fire while speaking to them in their native tongue. Several men sat nearby, sharpening arrows and checking their weapons. Jake knew he should leave, but he found himself unable to move. There was something about this scene that spoke to a deep longing in his heart. He had been alone on the trail for so long, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. The warmth and togetherness of the Apache family before him made him realize how lonely his life had become. Suddenly, his horse whinnied softly behind him, and every head in the camp turned toward his hiding place. Jake's blood ran cold as he realized his presence had been discovered. The Apache men were on their feet instantly, their weapons ready. There was nowhere to run, and Jake knew that trying to flee would only make things worse. Slowly, Jake stood up from behind the boulder, his hands raised to show he carried no weapon. The Apache warriors approached him cautiously, their faces stern but not immediately hostile. One of them, a tall man with graying hair and eyes like obsidian, stepped forward and spoke to Jake in broken English. "What you do here, white man? This Apache land?"
You lost?
Jake's mouth was dry as dust, but he managed to speak. "I'm looking for wild horses. I didn't know anyone was camped here. I mean no harm to you or your people." The older man studied Jake's face carefully as if trying to read his soul. Behind him, the 2 young women had risen from their places by the fire, their dark eyes fixed on the unexpected visitor. Jake could feel their gaze upon him, and something stirred in his chest that he had never felt before. "I am Chief Running Bear," the older man said finally. "These are my daughters, Morning Star and Silver Moon. You will sit by our fire tonight. Tomorrow we decide what to do with you." Jake nodded gratefully, knowing he had little choice in the matter. As he was led toward the warmth of the campfire, he caught his first clear glimpse of the 2 sisters. Morning Star, the elder, had fierce eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. Her sister, Silver Moon, appeared gentler, with a soft smile that made Jake's heart skip a beat. Neither woman looked away when Jake's eyes met theirs, and he felt a strange electricity in the air. He had heard stories of cowboys who had fallen in love with Apache women, tales that usually ended in tragedy. But as he settled down beside the fire, accepted a bowl of stew from the sister's mother, Jake wondered if his own story was just beginning. The fire crackled between them as the night deepened, and Jake found himself caught between 2 pairs of beautiful dark eyes, each holding mysteries he longed to uncover. He had come to this land seeking wild horses, but he'd found something far more dangerous and infinitely more precious. The question that would haunt him in the days to come was simple yet impossible. How could a man choose between 2 hearts when his own belonged to both? The morning sun painted the canyon walls gold as Jake woke to the sounds of the Apache camp stirring to life. He had slept fitfully on a blanket provided by Chief Running Bear. his dreams filled with dark eyes and soft voices. As he sat up, stretching his sore muscles, he noticed that both Morning Star and Silver Moon were already awake, tending to the cooking fire. Morning Star moved with the confidence of a natural leader, her every gesture purposeful and strong. She wore traditional Apache clothing decorated with intricate beadwork, and her long hair was braided with leather strips. When she looked at Jake, her eyes held a challenge, as if she were measuring his worth as a man. Silver Moon, on the other hand, moved like flowing water, graceful and serene. Her smile was warm when she offered Jake a cup of bitter coffee made from roasted roots. There was kindness in her eyes, but also a depth that suggested hidden strength beneath her gentle exterior. "You slept well, cowboy?" Morning Star asked, her English surprisingly good. Most white men cannot sleep when they are surrounded by Apache warriors. Jake accepted the coffee gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. "I've learned to sleep anywhere. A man who rides the range doesn't have the luxury of choosing his bed." Silver Moon knelt beside him, offering a piece of flat bread. "My sister thinks all white men are weak," she said softly. "But you do not seem weak to me," Morning Star snorted. "We will see. Today, if our father permits it, you will ride with us to find the wild horses you seek. Then we will learn what kind of man you truly are." Chief Running Bear approached them, his weathered face serious. "You may stay one more day," he told Jake. "My daughters say they will show you where the Mustangs run. But know this, white man. If you bring trouble to my people, if soldiers follow your trail to our camp, you will not live to see another sunrise." Jake met the chief's gaze steadily. "I give you my word, Chief Running Bear. I ride alone and no one follows me. I'm not a soldier or a settler looking to take your land. I'm just a cowboy trying to make an honest living." The chief nodded slowly. "Morning Star will test your riding skills. Silver Moon will test your heart. If you pass both tests, perhaps you are worthy of Apache respect." As the day progressed, Jake found himself caught between two very different worlds. Morning Star led him on a wild ride through treacherous canyon paths, testing his horsemanship and courage. She rode like the wind itself, her horse responding to the slightest pressure from her knees. Jake pushed his own mount to keep up, jumping ravines and racing across open meadows. "You ride well for a white man," Morning Star called out as they paused to rest their horses beside a crystal-clear stream. "But can you catch a Mustang with just a rope and your bare hands?" Before Jake could answer, she pointed to a small herd of wild horses grazing in the distance. The lead stallion was a magnificent black beast with a white blaze on his forehead. Jake had seen many wild horses in his time, but none quite like this one. "That is Thunder Runner," Morning Star explained. "Many Apache warriors have tried to catch him. All have failed. If you can rope him and ride him, I will consider you worthy of—" She paused, her cheeks coloring slightly. "Worthy of respect." Jake studied the horses carefully, planning his approach. He had learned from his father that catching wild Mustangs required patience and understanding, not just skill with a rope. As he prepared his lasso, he felt Morning Star's eyes upon him, judging his every move. Meanwhile, Silver Moon waited for them back at the camp, preparing a special meal. When Jake and Morning Star returned empty-handed but laughing together about Jake's near miss with Thunder Runner, Silver Moon felt a strange pang in her chest. She had watched her sister compete with men before, but never had she seen Morning Star look at a man the way she looked at this cowboy. That evening, as the three of them sat around the fire, Silver Moon began to tell Jake stories of her people. Her voice was like music, painting pictures of ancient legends and brave warriors. She spoke of the spirits that lived in the rocks and trees, of the sacred places where her ancestors walked, and of the prophecies that foretold great changes coming to the Apache people. Jake found himself drawn into her words, captivated by the rich culture and deep spirituality of the Apache way of life. Unlike many of his fellow cowboys who saw the native people as obstacles to progress, Jake began to understand that the Apache had a connection to the land that went far deeper than mere ownership. "Your people have wisdom that we white men have forgotten," Jake said quietly. "We see the land as something to be conquered and used. You see it as something to be honored and protected." Silver Moon's eyes shone with pleasure at his words. "You understand because your heart is open. Many men cannot see beyond their own needs and desires." Morning Star watched this exchange with growing concern. She had intended to test the cowboy's strength and courage, but she had not expected to find herself drawn to his quiet confidence and respectful manner. Now she saw the way he looked at her sister, and the way Silver Moon's face glowed when she spoke to him. As the fire burned low and the camp settled into sleep, both sisters lay awake thinking about the cowboy who had wandered into their lives. Each felt something stirring in her heart that she had never experienced before. Morning Star, who had always prided herself on her independence and strength, found herself wondering what it would be like to ride beside this man through all the adventures life might bring. Silver Moon, gentle and thoughtful by nature, imagined long conversations under starlit skies, sharing stories and dreams with someone who truly understood her people's ways. She had always believed that love should be like the joining of two rivers, each making the other stronger and more beautiful. Neither sister knew that Jake lay awake as well, staring up at the stars and wondering how fate had brought him to this impossible crossroads. He had come seeking horses, but he had found something far more precious and far more dangerous. Two beautiful women, each perfect in her own way, each calling to a different part of his soul. The question that tormented him as the night wore on was one that had no easy answer. How could he choose between the fire of Morning Star and the gentle wisdom of Silver Moon without breaking his own heart and theirs? 3 weeks had passed since Jake first stumbled into the Apache camp, and Chief Running Bear had granted him permission to stay longer. The cowboy had proven himself useful, helping with various tasks around the camp and sharing his knowledge of horse training. More importantly, he had shown genuine respect for Apache customs and traditions, something that had earned him grudging acceptance from even the most suspicious warriors. But Jake's extended stay had created an unexpected complication. Both Morning Star and Silver Moon had grown increasingly attached to him, and their rivalry for his affections was becoming impossible to ignore. The camp buzzed with whispered conversations about the two sisters and the white cowboy, who had captured both their hearts. Morning Star had taken to challenging Jake to increasingly dangerous tests of skill and courage. She led him on hunts for mountain lions, taught him to fight with Apache weapons, and pushed him to prove himself worthy of warrior status. During these adventures, Jake saw her fierce spirit and unwavering determination. She was like a wild Mustang herself, beautiful, powerful, and untamed. "You fight well for a white man," Morning Star said as they sparred with wooden knives near the river. "But do you have the heart of a warrior? Can you protect what you love even if it means facing death?" Jake parried her attack and stepped back, breathing hard. "I would die to protect the people I care about," he said seriously. "But I hope wisdom can prevent the need for such sacrifice." Morning Star's eyes flashed with something between admiration and frustration. "Wisdom is good," she admitted. "But sometimes a woman needs to know that her man will fight for her no matter the cost." Meanwhile, Silver Moon approached Jake's heart through gentler means. She taught him Apache words and customs, shared the spiritual beliefs of her people, and spoke to him about her dreams of peace between the Apache and the white settlers. During the quiet evening hours, she showed him how to work with beads and leather, creating beautiful objects that told stories of their people's history. "My grandmother always said that the strongest bonds are not forged in battle," Silver Moon told him as they worked together on a leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. "They are woven slowly, like a fine blanket, with threads of understanding and respect." Jake found himself equally drawn to both sisters, but in completely different ways. Morning Star ignited a passion in him that made his blood run hot and his heart race with excitement. She challenged him to be stronger, braver, and more decisive. With her, he felt like he could conquer the world. Silver Moon, on the other hand, brought him a deep sense of peace and connection that he had never experienced before. When he was with her, he felt understood and accepted in a way that touched his very soul. She made him want to be a better man, not through challenge but through inspiration. The situation reached a crisis point when a group of Apache warriors returned to camp with disturbing news. A cavalry patrol had been spotted 2 days' ride to the east, and they appeared to be following a trail that led toward the hidden valley where the camp was located. Chief Running Bear called a council of war immediately. The older warriors debated whether to move the camp to a more secure location or to prepare for a possible attack. Jake listened to the heated discussions, understanding enough Apache words to follow the general argument. "We should move deeper into the mountains," argued one warrior. "The soldiers have better weapons and more men. We cannot fight them in open battle. Running away shows weakness," countered another. "If we keep retreating, soon we will have no land left to call our own." Morning Star stood up suddenly, her voice ringing with conviction. I say we prepare for battle. We know these canyons better than any soldier. We can use our knowledge of the land to our advantage. Silver Moon rose as well, her voice soft but firm. Fighting will only bring more soldiers. Perhaps we should try to talk with them first to learn what they want. The council erupted in arguments as the two approaches clashed. Jake realized that the sisters' different philosophies, Morning Star's warrior spirit versus Silver Moon's peaceful wisdom, reflected a deeper division within the Apache community about how to deal with the advancing white civilization. Chief Running Bear raised his hand for silence. The decision is mine to make, he said gravely. But first I would hear from our white friend. Jake Morrison, you know the ways of the soldiers. What do you think they want? All eyes turned to Jake, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His answer could influence the fate of these people he had come to care about. But more than that, he realized that both Morning Star and Silver Moon were watching him intently, waiting to see which approach he would support. Chief Running Bear, Jake said carefully, I believe the soldiers are probably just on patrol, not looking for your camp specifically. But if they do find you, they will see your warriors and assume you are hostile. Morning Star is right that you know this land better than they do. But Silver Moon is also right that fighting will only bring more trouble. He paused, gathering his thoughts. In my experience, soldiers respond to strength but also respect courage that is shown through wisdom, rather than violence. Perhaps there is a third way. Show them that you are strong enough to fight if necessary, but wise enough to choose peace when possible. Chief Running Bear nodded slowly. You speak with wisdom, Jake Morrison. We will prepare for battle but hope for peace. If the soldiers come, we will meet them with strength and dignity. That night, as the camp prepared for the possibility of conflict, Jake found himself alone with his thoughts. He had successfully navigated a dangerous political situation, but he had not solved his personal dilemma. In fact, his diplomatic response had only made both sisters more attracted to him. Morning Star because he had acknowledged the need for strength, and Silver Moon because he had chosen wisdom over violence. As he stood guard on the canyon rim, watching for signs of the approaching cavalry, Jake knew that his time of decision was approaching. The soldiers would come, and when they did, the fragile peace of the camp would be shattered. In the chaos that followed, he would have to choose not just between two women, but between two ways of life. The stars wheeled overhead as Jake kept his lonely vigil, and somewhere in the darkness he heard the distant sound of horses moving through the night. The soldiers were coming, and with them, the moment when Jake Morrison would have to decide what kind of man he truly was and which path his heart would follow. The cavalry arrived at dawn, their blue uniforms stark against the red canyon walls. 20 soldiers rode in formation, led by a stern-faced captain whose weathered features spoke of years spent fighting on the frontier. Jake watched from his hidden position as they approached the entrance to the valley, their weapons ready but not immediately threatening. Chief Running Bear had positioned his warriors strategically throughout the canyon, invisible to the soldiers but ready to defend their families if necessary. Morning Star crouched behind a boulder near the camp, her rifle loaded and her finger steady on the trigger. Silver Moon stood beside her father at the edge of the camp, ready to serve as translator if peaceful communication proved possible. Jake knew he faced a crucial decision. He could remain hidden and let events unfold naturally, or he could reveal himself and try to serve as a bridge between the two groups. Either choice carried enormous risks, not just for himself but for everyone he had come to care about. Taking a deep breath, Jake made his choice. He stood up from his concealed position and began walking slowly down the canyon slope, his hands raised to show he carried no weapons. Both the Apache warriors and the cavalry soldiers turned toward him in surprise, weapons swinging to track his movement. "Hold your fire," Jake called out in English. "I'm an American citizen and I'm here voluntarily." The cavalry captain spurred his horse forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied Jake's appearance. The cowboy's clothes were dusty and worn, and he bore the deep tan of a man who lived under the open sky. Most telling of all, he wore a beaded Apache bracelet on his wrist, a gift from Silver Moon. "State your name and business," the captain demanded. "Jake Morrison, sir. I'm a cowboy from Texas, been tracking wild mustangs in these parts. I stumbled onto this Apache camp a few weeks back, and they've treated me with hospitality and respect." The captain's expression hardened. "Are you being held prisoner? Has your mind been poisoned by these savages?" Jake felt anger flare in his chest at the officer's words, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "No, sir, I'm here of my own free will. These people have shown me nothing but kindness. Chief Running Bear has honored me with his trust, and I won't betray that." Behind him, Jake could sense the Apache warriors watching tensely. He knew that Morning Star was probably furious at his decision to expose himself, while Silver Moon would be proud of his courage in trying to prevent bloodshed. Chief Running Bear stepped forward, his dignity unmistakable despite the tense situation. "I am Running Bear, leader of this band. We have done nothing to harm white settlers. We only wish to live in peace on the land of our fathers." The captain studied the Apache chief with grudging respect. "I'm Captain William Hayes, United States Army. We've had reports of Apache raids on settlements 50 miles south of here. Several ranchers have lost cattle and horses." "Not my people," Chief Running Bear replied firmly. "We hunt deer and rabbit, not white man's cattle. Perhaps you seek the band led by Red Wolf. They follow the warpath, but we do not." Jake stepped between the two leaders, sensing an opportunity to prevent disaster. "Captain Hayes, I've been living with these people for weeks. They're peaceful farmers and hunters, not raiders. They've shown me their stores of food. Corn and beans they've grown themselves, not stolen cattle." The captain's eyes flicked between Jake and the Apache chief, clearly weighing his options. "Even if that's true, cowboy, I have orders to investigate all Apache camps in this territory. These people need to move to the reservation where they can be properly supervised." At these words, several Apache warriors shifted restlessly, and Jake could feel the tension in the air becoming explosive. He knew that Morning Star would never accept forced relocation, and even peaceful Silver Moon would resist being torn from the sacred lands of her ancestors. "Captain," Jake said urgently, "these people aren't causing any trouble. They're living quietly on land that doesn't interfere with white settlements. Forcing them to move would only create the very problems you're trying to prevent." The captain's face flushed with anger. "I don't take orders from cowboys who've gone native, Morrison. These Apache will come with us to the reservation, willingly or otherwise." The sound of rifle bolts being pulled back echoed through the canyon as Apache warriors prepared for battle. Jake saw Morning Star rise from her hiding place, her weapon trained on the captain. Her eyes burned with the fire of a warrior ready to die for her freedom. But before anyone could fire a shot, Silver Moon stepped forward, her voice ringing clearly through the tense air. "Captain Hayes, my name is Silver Moon, daughter of Running Bear. I speak for my people when I say we do not want war, but neither will we be driven from our homeland like animals." The captain stared at her, clearly surprised by her command of English, and her calm dignity in the face of his threats. "You speak well for a savage girl, but the law is the law." Silver Moon's eyes flashed with anger at the insult, but her voice remained steady. "If the law says we must choose between our freedom and our lives, then we choose freedom. But perhaps there is another way." She turned to Jake, her gaze holding both trust and desperate hope. "Jake Morrison has lived among us. He knows our hearts and our ways. Let him speak for us to your government. Let him tell them that we are not their enemies." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Both sisters were looking at him now, Morning Star with fierce pride, Silver Moon with gentle faith. The decision he made in the next few moments would determine not only the fate of the Apache band but also the course of his own heart. "Captain Hayes," Jake said slowly, "I'll make you a deal. Give me permission to accompany this band to the territorial capital. I'll vouch for their peaceful intentions and help them petition the governor for permission to remain on their ancestral lands. If I can't convince the authorities within 60 days, they'll report to the reservation voluntarily." The captain considered this proposal, his eyes moving from Jake to the Apache warriors positioned throughout the canyon. He was outnumbered and fighting on unfamiliar ground, and Jake's offer provided a way to avoid bloodshed while still fulfilling his orders. 60 days. He agreed finally. "But if they don't show up at the reservation by then, I'll be back with a full company of cavalry and there won't be any more talking." As the soldiers rode away, Jake felt both sisters' eyes upon him. He had bought them time, but at a terrible cost. Now he would have to leave the canyon, leave the peaceful life he had found here, and venture into the white world to fight for the people he loved. The question that haunted him was which sister would ride beside him into an uncertain future, and which would remain behind to guard the sacred homeland they might all be forced to abandon forever. The territorial capital of Prescott bustled with activity as Jake and Silver Moon rode down the main street 6 weeks later. Their journey had been long and dangerous, filled with suspicious townspeople, hostile soldiers, and bureaucrats who viewed their mission with skepticism and barely concealed contempt. But they had persevered, and now they faced their final and most important challenge. Silver Moon had undergone a remarkable transformation during their travels. The traditional Apache clothing had been replaced with a modest dress in the white woman's style, her long black hair pinned up beneath a proper bonnet. She had learned to walk differently, speak differently, even think differently about the world around her. Yet Jake could still see the fierce Apache spirit burning in her dark eyes. "Remember," Jake said quietly as they approached the territorial governor's mansion, "you are now Mary Silverton, the daughter of a peaceful Apache chief who has embraced American ways. Your English is perfect because you were educated by missionaries. You represent the possibility of successful assimilation." Silver Moon, Mary, nodded solemnly. They had practiced this story countless times during their journey, refining every detail until it felt almost natural. The deception was necessary, because the white authorities would never seriously consider a petition from someone they saw as a savage, but they might listen to someone who represented their idealistic vision of civilizing. The native peoples, the governor, a portly man named William Thompson, received them in his ornate office with the air of someone doing a great favor. His eyes lingered on Silver Moon with obvious approval, pleased to see what appeared to be a successful example of Apache transformation. "Miss Silverton," the governor said warmly, "Mr. Morrison tells me that you wish to speak on behalf of your father's band. I must say, your appearance and demeanor are a credit to the civilizing influence of American education." Silver Moon smiled gracefully, though Jake could see the effort it cost her to accept such condescending praise. "Thank you, Governor Thompson. My people have indeed learned much from living peacefully alongside American settlers. We have built farms, raised livestock, and adopted many beneficial customs." This was partially true. Chief Running Bear's band had always been more agricultural than nomadic, and they had traded peacefully with white settlers when possible. But Silver Moon had carefully omitted any mention of their traditional hunting, their spiritual practices, or their fierce independence. "What exactly are you proposing?" the governor asked, settling back in his leather chair. Jake stepped forward with the carefully prepared legal documents they had spent weeks crafting with the help of a sympathetic lawyer in Phoenix. "Governor, we're requesting that you grant Chief Running Bear's band legal status as a peaceful agricultural community with the right to remain on their ancestral lands in the Vied Valley. In exchange, they will agree to certain conditions." Silver Moon took over the presentation, her voice steady and persuasive. "My people will register with territorial authorities, submit to regular inspections, and agree to send their children to American schools. They will adopt American farming methods and participate in the territorial economy through trade and taxation. Most importantly, they will serve as an example to other Apache bands that peaceful coexistence is possible." The governor's eyes lit up with interest. This was exactly the kind of success story he needed to advance his own political career. A peaceful Apache band that had voluntarily embraced American ways would be proof that his policies were working. "And what guarantees do I have that this band will honor such an agreement?" Thompson asked. Silver Moon reached into her traveling bag and withdrew a beautifully crafted peace pipe, decorated with intricate beadwork and blessed by the Apache medicine men. "This sacred pipe represents my people's solemn vow. As long as it remains unbroken, our commitment to peace will remain unbroken as well." The governor accepted the pipe with obvious pleasure, seeing it as a trophy of his diplomatic success. He agreed to draft the necessary legal documents, and within a week, Chief Running Bear's band had official protection under territorial law. But Jake knew that their real work was just beginning. True to Silver Moon's vision, she would have to remain in Prescott as a living symbol of successful Apache assimilation. The governor wanted to parade her before visiting officials, use her in speeches about the success of his Indian policies, and generally treat her as proof that the Apache people could be civilized. Jake found himself appointed as the official liaison between the territorial government and the Apache community, a position that paid well but chained him to the white world. He used his influence to help other peaceful Apache bands, but he was always careful to work within the system that had granted them this precious protection. Months passed, and Jake and Silver Moon built a life together in Prescott. They married in a Christian ceremony that satisfied the governor's need for proper appearances. though they also held a private Apache ceremony in the mountains outside town. To the white community, they appeared to be a perfect example of successful cross-cultural marriage. But late at night, when they were alone in their modest house on the edge of town, Silver Moon would sometimes weep quietly for the life she had left behind. She missed the freedom of the canyon, the smell of sage and juniper, the sound of her sister's laughter around the evening fire. "Do you regret coming with me?" Jake asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. Silver Moon considered the question carefully before answering. "I regret what I had to give up," she said finally, "but I do not regret what we accomplished. My people are safe, their homeland is protected, and other Apache bands have begun to follow our example. The cost was high, but the result has saved lives." News came irregularly from the canyon where Morningstar now helped her father lead their people. The band was thriving under their new legal protection, adopting American farming techniques while maintaining their cultural traditions in private. Morningstar had married a young Apache warrior and was raising children who would grow up free on their ancestral lands. The sisters exchanged letters through Jake, carefully written to pass territorial censorship. Morningstar wrote of successful harvests and new births, of young warriors learning both Apache traditions and American skills. Silver Moon wrote of political victories and new protections gained for Apache communities throughout the territory. But between the lines, Jake could read the deeper message. Both sisters missed each other terribly, and both sometimes wondered if the price of peace had been too high. One evening, 5 years after they had left the canyon, Silver Moon received a letter that made her cry with both joy and sorrow. Morningstar wrote that their father had died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that his people's future was protected. In his final words, he had blessed both his daughters for their different forms of courage. "He was proud of us both," Silver Moon whispered as Jake held her close. He understood that love sometimes means choosing duty over desire, sacrifice over comfort. Jake thought of the wild cowboy he had once been, riding free across the open range with no thought for anything beyond the next horizon. That man was gone forever, replaced by someone who had learned that true freedom sometimes meant accepting responsibility for others. As they sat together under the stars, Silver Moon's head resting on his shoulder, Jake realized that he had found something more precious than the romantic love he had once imagined. He had found a partnership built on shared purpose, mutual sacrifice, and a deep commitment to something greater than themselves. The Apache siblings had indeed vied for his love, but in the end both had won. Morningstar by gaining the freedom to live as a traditional Apache woman, and Silver Moon by finding a love that transcended personal desire to embrace a greater calling. And Jake Morrison, the cowboy who had stumbled into their lives seeking wild horses, had discovered that the greatest adventures are not found in the untamed wilderness, but in the choice to love wisely and live with purpose, even when that choice demands everything you once thought you wanted. The entire Apache camp held its breath as Morningstar and Silver Moon stood before the sacred fire, ready to share their visions. The flames cast dancing shadows across their faces, and Jake could see the profound changes that 3 days of fasting and spiritual seeking had wrought in both sisters. Morningstar spoke first, her voice carrying the authority of a true vision. "I saw myself riding beside Jake Morrison into a great city of stone and glass. The white men there wore fine clothes but had hearts of ice. They spoke words of law and order, but their eyes held only greed for our land. In my vision I fought them with fire and courage, but the flames consumed everything, our enemies, our hopes, and finally ourselves." The camp listened in solemn silence as she continued. "The spirits showed me that the path of the warrior, though honorable, leads only to destruction in this new world that is coming. My strength could not save our people, only delay their suffering." Silver Moon stepped forward, her gentle voice nonetheless carrying clearly through the night air. "In my vision I saw a different path. I walked beside Jake Morrison not as a warrior, but as a bridge between two worlds. I saw myself speaking to white leaders with words that carried the wisdom of our ancestors, but also the promise of peace. Some listened, some did not. But gradually understanding grew like a small stream becoming a mighty river." She paused, her eyes meeting Jake's across the fire. "But the spirits also showed me great sadness. I saw that to succeed in this mission, I would have to sacrifice much of my Apache way of life. I would have to live among the white people, dress as they dress, speak as they speak. I would save our people's right to their homeland, but I myself would never truly be able to return to it. Chief Running Bear nodded gravely. The spirits have spoken clearly to both my daughters. Morningstar has seen the futility of fighting the white man's world with only courage and weapons. Silver Moon has seen the possibility of finding peace, but at great personal cost. Jake felt his heart breaking as he began to understand the implications of the visions. If Silver Moon came with him to the territorial capital, she would indeed have to adopt white customs and mannerisms to be taken seriously by government officials. She would have to become a living symbol of successful assimilation, proving that Apache people could adapt to white civilization. There is more, Silver Moon continued, her voice growing soft with emotion. In my vision, I saw Jake Morrison choosing between two paths. One led back to this canyon, to the simple life of a cowboy among our people. The other led into the white world forever, where he would use his influence to help Apache people, but could never return to the freedom of the mountains. Morningstar stepped closer to her sister, and for the first time in weeks, Jake saw no rivalry between them, only deep love and understanding. My vision showed me the same choice, Morningstar said quietly, and I saw that whichever sister goes with Jake will face the same decision. To succeed in saving our people, she must be willing to leave them behind. The weight of this revelation settled over the camp like a heavy silence. Jake realized that he had been thinking of this mission as a temporary journey, a diplomatic mission that would end with triumphant return to the canyon. But the sisters' visions painted a much darker picture. Success would require permanent exile from the very way of life they were trying to preserve. Chief Running Bear stood slowly, his aged frame bearing the weight of terrible wisdom. My daughters, you have both seen truly. The world is changing and our people must change with it or be destroyed. But change does not mean we must lose everything that makes us Apache. He turned to address the entire camp. Silver Moon will go with Jake Morrison to the white man's capital. Her vision shows the path to survival. Even though it demands great sacrifice, Morningstar will remain here to lead our warriors and protect our people if the mission fails. Jake started to protest, but the chief raised his hand for silence. This is not a choice made lightly, Jake Morrison. Silver Moon has the gifts needed for this task: wisdom, patience, and the ability to see beyond immediate anger to long-term solutions. But more than that, her vision shows that she accepts the true cost of success. Silver Moon stepped forward and placed her hand on Jake's arm. I know what this means, she said softly. If we succeed in gaining legal protection for our people's homeland, I will have to remain in the white world as a symbol of cooperation. I will become a bridge between our peoples, but I will never again be fully Apache. Morningstar moved to embrace her sister, and Jake saw tears glistening in both their eyes. You are braver than any warrior, Morningstar whispered. To willingly give up everything you love for the sake of others, that is the greatest courage of all. The two sisters held each other for a long moment, and Jake realized that this might be the last time they would meet as equals, as simply sisters who loved each other. When Silver Moon left with him in the morning, she would begin a transformation that would make her forever different from the woman who had grown up in this canyon. There is one more thing the spirits showed me, Silver Moon said as she turned back to Jake. The choice you must make is not really between my sister and me. It is between the man you were when you came to this canyon and the man you can become. The old Jake Morrison could choose to love one woman and live simply. The new Jake Morrison must choose to serve a greater purpose, even if it means personal sacrifice. Jake felt the truth of her words settling into his soul like seeds in fertile earth. He had been thinking of this entire situation as a romantic dilemma, but it was actually something much larger. A test of what kind of man he wanted to be in a changing world. If I go with you to the capital, Jake said slowly, and if we succeed in our mission, what happens to us? Do we live as husband and wife among the white people? Do we pretend to be something we're not? Silver Moon's smile was sad but resolute. We live as whatever we must be to protect the people we love. If that means becoming symbols rather than simply ourselves, then we accept that burden. The Spirit showed me that true love sometimes means loving something greater than just each other. As the council meeting broke up and people returned to their sleeping places, Jake found himself walking alone with Silver Moon under the star-filled sky. Tomorrow they would begin the journey that would determine the fate of her people and the course of both their lives. Are you afraid? Jake asked as they stood at the edge of the canyon looking out over the moonlit landscape. Terrified, Silver Moon admitted, but also hopeful. My vision showed me that even though we will face great challenges and make terrible sacrifices, there is a chance for our peoples to live in peace. That possibility is worth any personal cost. Jake took her hand in his, feeling the calluses from years of traditional Apache work, alongside the softness that spoke of her gentle nature. Then we'll face whatever comes together, and maybe somehow we'll find a way to bridge two worlds without losing our souls. In the distance, a night bird called across the canyon, its cry echoing off the ancient stone walls. It sounded like a farewell, and Jake wondered if he would ever hear that sound again once he left this place that had become his true home. The council meeting that night was unlike any Jake had ever witnessed. The entire Apache band gathered around a great fire, their faces painted with the shifting shadows of dancing flames. Chief Running Bear sat at the center, his weathered hands folded as he listened to the heated debate that swirled around him. Some warriors argued for immediate flight to Mexico, where they could live free beyond the reach of American law. Others advocated for a fighting retreat into the deepest mountains, where they could wage guerrilla warfare against any soldiers who dared follow. But a growing number supported Jake's proposal to seek legal protection through the territorial government. Morning Star stood before the assembly, her voice strong and clear as she addressed her people. The cowboy Jake Morrison has proven himself brave and honorable. If he believes we can find justice in the white man's courts, then I say we should try. But I also say that someone must go with him to speak for our people with our own voice. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Silver Moon rose gracefully, her gentle nature evident even in the formal setting of the council. My sister speaks wisdom, but whoever goes must understand both worlds, ours and theirs. They must be strong enough to face the hostility of white society, yet wise enough to find common ground. Chief Running Bear raised his hand for silence. My daughters both speak truth. Jake Morrison, you have earned our trust, but you are still a white man. The authorities will listen to you, but they will not hear the Apache heart beating in your words. One of my people must accompany you. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he realized what was coming. The chief's eyes moved between his two daughters, and Jake could see the weight of decision pressing down on the older man. The question is, Chief Running Bear continued, which of my daughters should make this journey? Morning Star has the fire of a warrior and the courage to face any danger. She would not be intimidated by hostile white men or corrupt officials. But Silver Moon has wisdom beyond her years and the gift of finding peace where others see only conflict. The two sisters looked at each other across the fire, and Jake saw a lifetime of love and rivalry pass between them in that single glance. They had always competed for their father's approval, for recognition within their tribe, and now they were competing for the right to accompany the man they both loved. Morning Star stepped forward first. Father, I should go. I am not afraid of the white man's cities or their laws. I can protect Jake if soldiers try to harm him, and I can speak with the strength our people need. Silver Moon moved to stand beside her sister. Father, I believe I should make this journey. My heart seeks peace, and peace is what we need now. I can help Jake find the words that will touch the hearts of those who make the laws. Chief Running Bear studied his daughters carefully, his lined face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Jake realized that the chief was facing an impossible choice, much like the one that tormented Jake himself. Both daughters were qualified to make the journey, but in very different ways. There is another consideration, the chief said slowly. Whoever goes with Jake Morrison may not return. The white world is dangerous for Apache people. They could be imprisoned, killed, or forced to remain in that world forever. I cannot send both my daughters on such a mission. The weight of those words settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. Jake felt his heart breaking as he realized the full cost of his proposal. Not only would he have to choose between the two sisters, but that choice might mean permanent separation from the one left behind. An old medicine man named Spotted Eagle spoke from his place near the fire. Perhaps the spirits should decide. Let the sisters undergo the trial of vision. The one who receives the clearest guidance from the ancestors should make the journey. The trial of vision was an ancient Apache ritual that Jake had heard mentioned, but never witnessed. It involved fasting, meditation, and seeking spiritual guidance in the sacred caves that honeycombed the canyon walls. The process could take several days and was not undertaken lightly. Both sisters agreed to the trial immediately. their competitive natures overriding any fear of the mystical process. Jake watched with growing anxiety as preparations began. He had hoped that somehow the choice could be avoided, but now it seemed that fate itself would decide which sister would accompany him. For 3 days and nights, Morningstar and Silver Moon retreated to separate caves high in the canyon walls. They fasted and prayed, seeking visions that would guide not only their personal decision but the future of their entire people. Jake found himself unable to eat or sleep properly, tormented by worry for both women and dread of the coming decision. On the third night, as Jake sat staring into the dying embers of the campfire, Chief Running Bear joined him in the darkness. "You love both my daughters," the chief said quietly. It was not a question. Jake nodded, unable to deny the truth. "I never meant for this to happen, Chief. I came here looking for horses, not for love. But somehow both your daughters found their way into my heart." "Love is not something a man can control," Running Bear replied. "It comes like the wind, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always changing the landscape of our hearts. The question is not whether you love them both, but which love will serve the greater good." Jake turned to look at the older man, seeing understanding in his weathered features. "How can I choose between them? Morningstar's courage could move mountains, but Silver Moon's wisdom could prevent the need to move them at all." "Perhaps," the chief said thoughtfully, "the choice will be made for you. The spirits often see paths that mortal eyes cannot perceive." As if summoned by his words, a figure emerged from the shadows. Silver Moon approached the fire, her face pale but peaceful. Behind her, Moving Star descended from her own cave, her expression intense and focused. Both sisters moved to stand before their father and Jake, and the entire camp gathered to hear the results of their spiritual quest. The moment of decision had finally arrived, and Jake felt his heart pounding like war drums in his chest. Whatever the sisters had seen in their visions would determine not only which one would accompany him to the territorial capital, but which one would risk everything for the chance to save their people's way of life.